Hey guys, what's up? Today, we will research which nation has the biggest rail network on the planet. Homegrown travel in certain countries is nearly characterized by the railroads, and there are numerous nations where going via train is the simplest and most helpful method for getting around. Anyway, there might be a couple of shocks in the worldwide rankings underneath. All nations are recorded by the absolute track lengths of their rail organizations. Figures are gathered together or down to the closest 1,000 kilometers, and incorporate both traveler and cargo lines. The information comes from the most recent accessible data from uns.org, except if generally expressed. Whenever the cart first was utilized with the lap of the ponies who pulled them. Yet, in 1802, the principal steam motor was made. In 1825, the main steam motor was utilized to convey travelers. Throughout the long term, we have perceived how railroads spread all around the world, and as time passes arrived at new tourist spots. We will investigate 10 nations that have the biggest railroad network starting around 2023 and realize about them in more detail. Number 1. United States of America. The U.S. of America is the country with the world's biggest spread rail line organization. The complete length of the US's rail line network is 257,560 kilometers. Be that as it may, a larger part of the organization is utilized in America for cargo transportation. The cargo network has even tracks universally too. The traveler administration is chiefly confined to the significant urban areas, with few intercity courses to interface the significant urban communities of the USA. All through the country at present standard measure is utilized. On the off chance that we investigate the historical backdrop of the USA, we will observe that the principal rail lines were worked during the 1820s and 1830. The area of the principal railroad was New Britain and the Mid-Atlantic locale. The principal association which was begun was Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Its development was extremely noticeable in the years which followed. The primary intercontinental railroad was worked after the American nationwide conflict, and was utilized to associate California with the remainder of the country. The Second Great War was an enormous lift for the rail line and was liable for gigantic development. In any case, with the economic crisis of the early 2010s, rail lines were seriously impacted. The Second Great War helped in its development again, however, after that because of expanding interest in the carrier, and the auto business began its decay once more. This came as an enormous blow as numerous privately owned businesses failed, which prompted the formation of Amtrak in 1971. Amtrak was given the obligation to take care of the intercity public vehicle. After many rule relaxations of the public authority, many organizations were purchased and consolidated to make another substance. The cargo has anyway remained a significant supporter of the rail line of the USA. The railroad of the U.S. is both nationalized as well as claimed by privately owned businesses. Other than Amtrak, BNSF Rail Route, Canadian Public Rail Route, Association Pacific Railroad, Association Pacific Railroad, and CSX Transportation are a portion of the famous railroad organizations in the U.S. right now. Number 2. China. The second biggest railroad network on the planet is in China. As indicated by the most recent reviews, the absolute length of the rail route tracks is in excess of 150,000 kilometers. Additionally, the length of the Great Speed Rail track is 40,000 kilometers, which is the longest in the entire world. The tasks of the rail lines are constrained by a state-run organization known as China State Rail Line Gathering Organization, Limited, framed in 2013 after the service of rail line was disintegrated. The organization goes under the service of money straightforwardly. As per the insights of 2019, around 3.660 billion travelers were conveyed. In the interim, a sum of 4.389 billion tons of cargo was conveyed to China. Has seen a 5 times expansion in cargo administrations from 1980 to 2013. In addition, during a similar period, the traveler turnover expanded by multiple times. These numbers themselves show how significant and occupied the Railroad of China. Around 68.35% of the all-out length of the rail line is energized in China. With the outcome of the railroad, China is making arrangements for extension and has set an objective of 274,000 kilometers continuously in 2050. Number 3. Russia. The biggest country on the planet is Russia. In this way, seeing Russia third on the rundown is definitely not a major shock. Despite the fact that Russia is a nation having the third biggest rail line organization, a significant piece of the nation isn't associated with rail lines because of the populous thickness and the outrageous environment. This is the explanation why Russia has been depicted as the monetary marvel of the 19th, 20th, and 21st hundreds of years. The size is the explanation that we can see that really long travel is extremely normal. In any case, most of the extremely long travel is under the JSC Russian Railroad, which has a 98.6% piece of the pie starting around 2017. Albeit the size of Russia is greater than the USA and China, the thickness of rail line tracks is as yet more modest than both the previously mentioned nations. Cargo transportation is likewise little, and around 33% of the cargo comprises coal and coke. In the interim, ferrous metals make up just 10% of the cargo. The absolute length of the rail line network in Russia is around 600 kilometers. In Russia, the primary method for transportation of products is railroads in light of the superclimate and territory. The Russian rail line is cargo predominant, and traveler administration isn't exceptionally tremendous in light of its populace also. The service of the method for correspondence was the real administering body that took care of the smooth running till 2003. After 2003, the obligation of the rail route was taken by the business entity Russian Rail Lines. Russia has worldwide tracks interfacing it with many adjoining nations. The nations like Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Azerbaijan, Finland, Poland, China, and North Korea. The rail line of Russia is completely nationalized, with 51.17% of the rail lines being charged. Number 4. India. India is fourth on the rundown of the biggest rail line network on the planet. In India, the rail route is one of the significant methods for transportation for two travelers, as well as cargo. The Railroad of India is worked by the Indian Rail Line, an association under the Service of Rail Routes. Through Indian Rail Lines, a normal of 22.15 million individuals and 3.32 metric lots of cargo were moved consistently from 2019 to 2020. In India, confidential associations just have an administration of the cargo trains. In the meantime, the traveler trains are under open association. In 2020, the public authority attempted to privatize the traveler area too. The Indian Rail Route is on the 8th spot in the rundown of the biggest managers. Over the course of the year, the administration and the running of the rail route were done impeccably by the Public Authority of India. This legitimate administration prompted the improvement of the rail route greatly. Indian Rail Route has set an objective to completely charge the tracks by 2023. The task is like new trains, which would be fit for running at 200 km per hour speed in the old tracks, as well as Indian fast rail projects that will see speeds over 300 km per hour. Indian Rail Line has likewise been a significant piece in fostering the rail line of the adjoining nations of Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka too. India. The proposition for the railroad was first made in Madras in 1832. Nonetheless, the first train in quite a while ran in 1837. In any case, the principal traveler train of India ran from Bombay to Thane on the 16th of April 1853. 2 Indian stations are on the rundown of UNESCO World Legacy Destinations, with one being the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaja Terminal and the mountain rail lines of the slopes. India has a total route length of 70,225 kilometers with a total track length of 126,366 kilometers, and about 71% of the tracks are electrified. Indian Railway has 7,325 stations, and around 40% of routes are double or multi-tracked. Number 5. Canada. Canada positions 5th in the rundown of nations with the longest rail line organization. The absolute length of the railroad is 49,422 kilometers. The principal railroad organization in Canada was the Champlain and Holy Person Lawrence Railroad, which was begun in 1836. The rail route of Canada is chiefly utilized for cargo purposes. Most of the railroad is utilized for the transportation of products, as it were. The rail line of Canada is completely privatized. 2 significant organizations take care of the cargo: Canadian Public and Canadian Pacific. As traveler transportation isn't so well known, just a single organization by the government Crown Partnership by means of rail offers the support of cross-country traveler development. The 3 significant urban communities of Canada have legitimate rail lines for travelers. The help for travelers in the Montreal region is constrained by EXO. In the meantime, in the area of Toronto, travelers drive under GO Travel. In the areas of Vancouver, West Coast Express controls the drive of travelers basically. There are numerous metro and little rails also in Canada. The railroad is likewise utilized for the travel industry, as the rough mountain dweller and illustrious Canadian Pacific give extravagance voyages through the Canadian Rockies and the mountain districts of English Columbia and Alberta. A portion of the primary organizations that work to serve individuals in Canada is the Canadian Public Rail Line, Canadian Pacific Rail Route, Hudson Sound Rail Line Co., Quebec North Shore and Labrador Rail Line, Rail Link Canada, and so forth. In Canada, under a solitary % of the railroad is jolted. Number 6. Germany. Germany is 6th on the rundown of the nations with the biggest rail line organization. It is an individual from the Worldwide Association of Railroad and has a national code of 80. Germany is positioned 4th in the EU rail framework in the presentation file for the power of purpose, nature of administration, and well-being. The absolute length of the German rail line is 40,682 kilometers. The length of the electric tracks is 55.38%. Deutsche Bahn is the organization that takes care of the rail line in Germany. Deutsche Bahn is a state-claimed privately owned business. Lately, it's seen that many such organizations have offered their administration in state-sponsored for nearby locales as well, with respect to significant distance administrations also. The Deutsche Bahn had around 67% of the provincial market in 2016 and around 68.7% in the cargo market. As per the records, 452 rail route administrators were enrolled in 2016. Out of the 452 administrators, 124 had territorial traveler administrators, with 20 being significant distance administrators and the rest 163 being cargo administrators. Deutsche Bahn has 4 sorts of significant distance activities between City Express, Eurocity, Intercity, and Euronight. A portion of different administrators who have significant distance series is Thalys, Transdev, Cisalpino, and Flixtrain. A portion of the administrators that do the provincial administrations are Territorial Express, Regional Bahn, S-Bahn, U-Bahn, and Cable Car and Light Rail administrations. Number 7. Argentina. In mainland of South America, Argentina is the country with the biggest rail line organization. It is additionally the 7th biggest railroad network on the planet. The railroad of Argentina was a lot of prosperous during the 20th 100 years. As per records, the complete length of the rail route was around 47,000 kilometers after the Second Universal Conflict. In any case, from that point onward, because of the development of parkways, the significance of the railroad diminished. In addition, with the separation of the Ferrocarriles Argentinos, things turned out to be much more dreadful. From that point onward, the privatization of the rail line was additionally finished. Be that as it may, in 2012, the public authority of the nation began to nationalize the rail lines after the blunder of the privately owned businesses, and from that point forward the rail route of Argentina has begun to develop. The rail lines of Argentina have confronted numerous challenges throughout the years, as the rail route was privatized twice before and they are again nationalized as the privately owned businesses neglected to appropriately run it. The public authority has over the course of the years begun to empty increasingly more cash into the rail lines. The rail line is likewise utilized in the travel industry in the urban communities of Buenos Aires, Cordoba, Entre Rios, Mendoza, Misiones, Patagonia, Rosario, Salta, and Tierra del Fuego. Numerous nations are likewise associated with Argentina by rail line. Assuming we take a gander at the rundown, we will track down the provinces of Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, and Uruguay. All are associated by rail routes. As of now, the complete length of the rail route is 36,966 kilometers, however, a tiny piece of it is jolted at this point. Number 8. Australia. Australia comes in the 8th spot in the rundown of the nations having the biggest railroad organization. The Rail Route Organization of Australia is a vital piece of the nation's vehicle framework. Most of the rail route is under the public authority of Australia for certain confidential administrators too. The strategies are made and the assets for the approaches are given by the central administration of the country. The principal issue that rail routes looked at over the course of the years is the utilization of various checks by various provinces before. This has made joining the railroads particularly troublesome. The jolt in Australia began in 1919, yet it is likewise an issue in light of the fact that the primary principles were not utilized. The diesel motor was first presented in 1950. The cargo of Australia is additionally excellent as the nation is loaded with regular assets. Significant distance traveler trains are likewise worked in Australia. The all-out length of the rail routes in Australia is 33,270 kilometers with around 11% of the whole length of the track being charged. Number 9. Brazil. Brazil is in the 9th spot on the rundown of the biggest railroad networks on the planet. The ongoing length of the railroads of Brazil is 30,122 kilometers, and in excess of 30% of the tracks are being charged too. It is the second biggest in the South American mainland after Argentina. The railroad was begun in the 19th 100 years in Brazil. Many organizations possessed the rail line in those days, yet in 1957, the entire rail line of the nation was nationalized. The nationalized railroad was under Rede Ferroviária government, Sociedade Anônima. Notwithstanding, from 1999 to 2007, the RFFSA was broken up and as of now, both private and public organizations take care of the rail lines of Brazil. Despite the fact that having such a major organization of rail lines, still the traveler rendering isn't generally excellent in Brazil, as the privately owned businesses couldn't advocate for the travelers, which prompted the stopping of numerous traveler trains. As of now, practically all the rail line is utilized for cargo transportation. In spite of the fact that there are many plans, it actually looks like that will be extremely difficult to carry out those works. Brazil is additionally associated with different nations like Argentina, Bolivia, and Uruguay through the railroads. Number 10. France. At the 10th spot on the rundown of the nations with the biggest rail route organization, we have France. The rail route of France is for the most part utilized for traveler administrations. It ought to likewise be noticed that what draws in travelers more is the high-velocity rail. SNFC is the state-claimed association that cares for the rail line of France. In France, the railroad was initially begun in 1827, in Holy Person, Etienne to Andréza. As per records, France has the fifth most utilized traveler network on the planet, and is positioned second in Europe. France is likewise an individual from the Global Association of Railroads, and its nation code is 87. On account of cargo, just 9% of the cargo is moved by the rail route. Albeit the Metropolitan Railroad of France is grown, still it's developing. There are metros in 6 significant urban communities in France. The 6 urban communities are Lille, Lyon, Marseille, Paris, Rennes, and Toulouse. The length of the rail route in France is 29,273 kilometers. Also, 53.59% of the railroad is energized.